All right, everyone. Welcome back. I'm saying welcome back like we were here last week. We weren't. It's been like 3 months since you've seen me, but I'm back again. And I'm so excited to be hosting this Lunch and Learn series, which will be a little bit shorter show. We're going to get you in and out of here in 30 minutes flat. I promise we won't go over. Please don't let me go over. I promise not to go over. But I think we can have some really strong discussions about Black Kids Can't Wait. You guys know how I feel about that. We didn't get to talk about it a lot in the last series, so we're talking about it more this time. But I think that in this Lunch and Learn series, we can get some good information packed into a really small amount of time. While you're having your lunch break, you should just be snacking, eating right now as we go. So without giving any more introduction, I just want to say that we are talking today about how we can reconstruct the educational system so that it is designed to actually benefit Black children. Now, I know we talk a lot about children of color, but we're talking specifically about Black children today because children of color and Black children often skew a little bit differently in the educational system. And so we are speaking very specifically about children that look like me. So, oh, and I like to have fun. If you've not tuned in before, I like to have fun, even on serious topics. So let me introduce our guests so we can get right in. Before I get to introduce the guests, I want you to know that we're going to drop in the chat, in the comments, in the whatever we call them on Facebook, a link to the report that we did a couple of shows on this report earlier on in this series, but the full report on the impact of racial bias on Black students in LA Unified School District. And so there's a full report, and we're not going to go over the entire report, but we're just going to talk about some of the key findings and how we can address those key findings. If you've not seen the report, go ahead and read that report. You can pull that report up for yourself at any given time and read that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my amazing guest today. I have Dr. Darin. And I was going to say Darin because I have a Darin also, but he's spelled differently. Dr. Darin.
Just think about him.
Early. Yes, Dr. Darin Early. And he is the director of the Loyola Marymount University Family of Schools. Welcome, Dr. Early. We have with us Dr. Alicia Montgomery, and she is the executive director of the Center for Powerful Public Schools. And then we also have with us Dr. Tyisha Noise, and she is the new principal of City Charter School. Yay, welcome. Thank you all for being here today. You were all selected as guests today because someone here at Speak Up thinks that your voice is very powerful and very impactful when it comes to this discussion. So welcome. We're going to jump right in. Dr. Noise, you are new over at City Charter School, and give me just a little bit of your background before going to City Charter School.
Oh, goodness. So I've had the privilege of teaching coast to coast. I actually started my teaching career in New York City, in Brooklyn, and then the Bronx. And then I spent a lot of time in Jamaica, Queens. And then I came home to LA because this is where I'm from. I spent the last 7 years in Watts with Green Dot Public Schools in both teaching and administration before getting here.
Awesome. And then, so Dr. Montgomery, would you give me just the scaled down version of your background?
Sure. I'm Alicia Montgomery. I spent most of my professional career in Sacramento, where I worked at every layer of the system. So from pre-K all the way to post-secondary. I worked in some state organization and state departments as well, focusing on language acquisition and English learners and reading. And now currently the executive director here at Center for Powerful Public Schools.
Nice. Thank you. And then Dr. Early, if you give us just a brief background on yourself.
No problem. Born and raised in Los Angeles, attended LAUSD, left, went to Howard University, which brought me back home with a commitment to my folks, even a deeper commitment. Anyway, taught in LAUSD for 16 years as an administrator, secondary teacher, left there and came on to LMU, where for the last 12 years, I've been directing a partnership that engages LAUSD schools, LA Archdiocese schools, and then a couple of independent charter schools.
Awesome. Welcome. So that's why we have this crew here. I am just a moderator and a parent. And so let's just start by saying, like, this report was very specific to LA Unified School District, but this report almost could have come out of any city, USA, which is an enlightening yet sad state of affairs for where Black and brown children land in public school systems. And what we know and what Speak Up is really trying to shed light on is that there are known racial biases that happen in schools, and how we actually shift from shedding light on the racial bias issue to how do we begin to really address and fix the problem? How do we correct the problem? And so this conversation, I want to talk about first, just from your perspective, how do you explain what racial inequities actually look like in school? Because what we see these reports and we hear individual parents complaining about an issue their student had. And it can be easily dismissed as you're pulling a race card, or so what does it look like as an overall? What do racial inequities in a school and in the school system really look like?
I'll jump in before both of my two esteemed panelists. And I'll say this, for me, it looks like when the cultural capital and the social capital that is being brought to schools by children and their parents is immediately devalued based on the fact that they are African American, and people have a perception in their mind about who Black people are and who Black people are not. And so consequently, that's when you get that disconnect in terms of how I'm going to treat these children, how I'm going to value these families, and how I'm going to support and serve them.
I think on a, just on the ground level, like, it looks like out of every 100 suspensions, right, 60 or 70 of those are Black kids in a district where they're a third of that.
Got it.
It's evident. It's evident in all the data points, right? When you can look at any data point and notice that Black students are at the bottom, even sometimes lower to students who don't even speak English, right? Then you know that that's what the inequities look like.
They're also highly underrepresented, right, in every opportunity, right, that is built for college, right? So in AP classes, in honors classes, you either see fewer African-American kids in those classes, or you see fewer of those classes present in the master schedule, particularly when we're talking about high schools. And even at the middle school level, I've dealt with some middle schools where students are double blocked, right, in English and in math because they are considered behind, but there is nothing enjoyable or engaging built into their academic experience that's designed to hook them, right, to school, to hook them to engagement, to hook them to scholarship. It's just more of what they failed at previously. And so school becomes painful for kids. And people justify it with, well, we need the scores. And my thought is, well, kids don't need scores. You need scores. But what kids need are to be excited about learning, to be engaged in this process, in this place that they are supposed to come to every day, to feel happy about it. And if double blocking in a subject where I'm struggling doesn't do that for me, then we need to think we need a new intervention, right? More academics where I have failed or have struggled don't help engage me. In fact, they turn me off and make me want to be somewhere else as a student.
Wow. Powerful statement. Very powerful statement. And I've never even heard of double blocking in a math or in English. I guess I'm not there yet. But that does make sense. And so I wanted to first just ask, like, what it looks like in the school system, because oftentimes concerns of parents can be dismissed as something else, as, your kid can't learn, or your kid acts up, or your kid, whatever, but it can be dismissed and not actually addressed for what it really is within the school system. So with sort of shedding light on what that looks like in the schools, how does a school first, then a school district, or maybe a school district, then the school, I'm not sure which way it works. How do they authentically really address the existence of racial bias in the classroom, in the school, and in the district? I'm not sure which way that comes first.
Well, everything is systemic, right? Everything is systemic, and we sometimes can't have conversations about schools without having conversations about the districts in which they sit, unless they're a charter school. And even then, we have to talk about the community in which they sit, right? If you have a community that has been neglected, that has been overlooked, that has not been served, then you probably have a school that's the same. So sometimes we want to look at the system that's supporting the school. And so these issues start systemically. So it doesn't really matter whether you start with school or district. Either way, you've got to deal with the system itself.
Yeah, Dr. Montgomery, and you're right. And when you look at the system, I think in terms of even the topic for today, it says, how can we reconstruct? Well, before you can reconstruct, you have to kind of deconstruct, and you have to break things down to the disaggregate parts and say, to the aggregate parts rather, and say, okay, what's happening over here? So we say, what's happening in discipline? What's happening in classroom management? But we look at those pedagogical pieces, but we don't look at the pieces around overall school culture and climate. Where are the relationships laid out at? When that child walks into the school space, how are they greeted? How are they treated? How do they interact? How are they interacted with? And consequently, these are the pieces that systemically go unnoticed. So you have those obvious things like, just access to curriculum, access to, to materials, things like that. But the relational pieces, those are the pieces that go unnoticed that really are systemic and systemically are hurting our children.
I would agree with that. I think I would push out to the idea that I don't know that you start in one place or the other, but you start both and, right? Exactly. I think people at the top, there's some conversations that have to be had. And one of them is something as simple as starting with this idea that if we're going to serve children of color, Black children in particular, then we ought to read Black authors who that's what they do, right? You can sit in the middle of LAUSD on any day, but nobody's going to have a conversation about Tyrone Howard or Pedro Noguera, who have spent their entire careers in research about the success of Black children, Black boys in particular. But my superintendent isn't reading that, right? And so if my superintendent isn't reading that, if they don't elevate the voices of those who spend time, right, with the children that we are talking about, with that population of people, then those voices fall on deaf ears. And then from the bottom up, right, teachers who also understand that there is scholarship about the children that we are talking about, scholarship that comes from the people who used to be those children. Tyrone Howard, for example, grew up and went to public school in Compton, right? And so he's not just Tyrone Howard, author of everything possible about Black boys. He was also a little Black boy in Compton who understands with a personal touch what this system really means, right? And so we have to be willing to have those conversations from both sides. But it also, to Dr. Early's point, right, it comes with the dismantling. We need to dismantle this idea that there is no Black scholarship from which we can gain the tools that we need to give Black children what they need, right? Education for us did not start with this system. It started with us post-slavery teaching each other how to read, right? The current book that's out, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, unpacks the entire literary structure of the Black community coming out of slavery and how we taught each other to read because we understood the value of those things, right? There is educational tradition in us that supersedes and preceded the system that we are in. And if we are going to unpack this system and get it to where it needs to be, we need to go back to the place where it was successful because we were not always in this situation.
And even when we do that, there are a lot of systems that are trying to do just that. But once we do that and we try to bring someone in like Tyrone Howard, Pedro Noguera, whoever you're bringing in, it's for a hit and miss. It's a checkoff box. We just want to check off that we've done equity, check, we've done it, check, instead of really holding people accountable for change. I'm kind of done with, here's the implicit bias workshop, here's the this workshop, here's the that workshop, and nobody's being held accountable for what are you changing as a result of that? Like if you know you have those biases, teacher A or administrator B, then what are you doing now that's different than what you did yesterday? Like if we're not holding people accountable to change, the system will always stay the same, no matter how many people we put in the equity office or have a director of equity who has no budget whatsoever. It's always kind of a surface level kind of approach. And we've got to go deeper and we've got to really address change, real change within ourselves and within the system.
So Dr. Montgomery, you made a really valid point. And I'd just like to dig a little deeper into that one. How do we hold our school, our teacher, our administrators, and our district accountable for this change? Because there is a lot of talk about the change. There's been like $4 million now allocated to LA Unified School District in enacting some change. How do we hold the district the schools, the administration, and the teachers in the classroom accountable for actually making change?
Well, the first thing we have to understand is that these children are traumatized. Like, we're traumatized. I'm traumatized. Like, when I go into a store and somebody follows me around, I'm traumatized. If a student's in the classroom and they're being called out time and time again because they're brown, they are traumatized. Classrooms are re-traumatizing kids every day. So if we begin with that we're causing harm, then we can easily get rid of those that are causing harm to our children. And if not get rid of them, put them on an improvement plan to stop causing harm to our children. Like, if we're serious about it, we're going to do that. And that's where we start. We start by really saying, this is very, very serious. This is something we have got to solve because we are harming children.
If I can piggyback on Dr. Montgomery, Dr. Montgomery, and this is something that I wonder about, and I would love to hear what you guys think. According to the report, right, only 7% of the students in LAUSD are African American. And I think one of the great stories that has been told, right, is there's implication, right, that integrated schools and schools in a certain neighborhood are better than others, right, where we're not dealing with the idea that schools that are focused on the children in them are better, right? And what would happen, right, if we encourage parents to secede the system that they are in and demand schools that are reflective of their children, right? I think one of the areas that the system has definitely failed is in empowering parents to understand how to get what they need. If you call twice and you don't get what you need, take to social media and put some school's name on it, because I promise you, they call back when the whole world is looking at their name sitting in lights on social media, right? And Caucasian and rich parents have learned this, right? They have learned that their pull, right, matters. And so how do we equip African-American parents and Black parents to use their voices to get what they need for their children? Because I think it's going to take them and the kids telling us, what do you want at school every day? And then building it for them, by them.
So Dr. Noise, I don't know if you are in my brain right now, because everything you're saying is registering. One is just this, when you said for them, by them, I am a big proponent of the fact that our education of our kids needs to be FUBU. It needs to be for us, by us. We are the only people that are going to do right by our children. That's period. Now, other folks can come along, but I'm not going to, I can't take care of your yard if for you. I have to take care of your yard with you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just this. Dr. Noyce earlier, she talked about the cultural compatibility of academic excellence. That has to be something that our children understand, that this is not something that's new to us, that us doing well in school is not an accident. This is something that we've done historically. We've done it historically on this side of the Atlantic and on the other side of the Atlantic. So when we think about that, we have to understand that this is who we are. Excellence is where we come from. So then it goes to that place of parental agency. When our parents understand that they have the capacity to push the levers, to make things happen in school districts, and then we equip them with whatever tools they need. When she talked about Dr. Tyrone Howard, she talked about Dr. Pedro Noguera, and these are guys who have conversations with parents and we're not talking about in the professional spaces, we're talking about in the private spaces, to say, hey, this is how you advocate for your children. And that's a critical piece, because once we begin advocating for our children, parents hold everybody accountable, from board members to classroom teachers to their own child. And so I really think it begins with, how are we equipping our parents to push those levers that will make good things happen for our kids? The last thing I want to say on this is just this. We cannot ignore the importance and the significance of our children understanding their cultural history, because their cultural identity is going to be one of those key tools that strengthens them to have the agency, that when things are happening crazy in their class, that they can speak to it first. And then, like in The Lion King, when the hyena didn't respond to Simba, then Mufasa was right behind him with the big roar. And we need to be Mufasa, but we need to equip our kids to be those Simbas that can advocate for themselves also.
I love that. I love the word advocate always. And I wonder how we teach our children to advocate for themselves in the classroom first, without being perceived as disruptive or argumentative or combative. How we teach them to advocate for themselves in the classroom. And then when they see that is not going to get them there, how we then teach parents how to advocate for their students in the classroom and in the school, and then maybe at the district level. Like, can you speak to like how we do that? Because I do know I have a brown son who will speak out, but sometimes it is perceived as combative. And I don't even know that he always means it that way. He's trying to learn to advocate for himself. But I think these students we need some direction in how they, one, in the classroom, do get a voice. They do get to say, like, you're making me feel really crappy today, you know, but how they get to do that without being punished, without being removed from the classroom and sent to the principal's office, and then how they can have their family support come in when that doesn't work, and, you know, they not be dismissed as a disruptive Black family or the disruptive, angry Black mom.
I'm wondering if there needs to be, like, we have parent coordinators, right, in lots of schools, right, parent advocates that are on campuses, right, where there's some place for families to go to have a conversation about how to do that. In my last school, right, I was in a very large comprehensive high school in the middle of Watts, and I just made myself that person. I saw things happen with Black kids that were not okay with me, and so I became a person who would say to a child, you have a problem with this person or that person, and you don't think you can express that effectively, come see me. I got that covered. And I'd call parents, and then I'd go confront teachers. Did we or did we not treat this child this way? Did we or did we not actually use these words with this child? And I had teachers look me in the face and tell me they said rude things to children. I was like, and so we will repair this how exactly? How will you repair with this child? Because they need to come in your class tomorrow and they need to feel safe. And I had lots of teachers get mad, but because we had a policy about restorative practice, right, I could make some demands as an administrator. Oh, we're going to fix with the kid. That's the job, right? If you made this child feel a way, then it is your job to fix it. And I had no problem. I was notorious for giving parents, upset Black parents, my boss's phone number, direct line. Not school phone, direct line, direct emails, talk to them. And then if they don't answer, show up.
So Angel, this is not new. And so what we need to do, we need to approach situations that our children are facing like any other problem. We need a lesson plan for that. And so in our homes and in spaces, we can roll our children through scenarios and say, this occurs, how would you handle it? So that the first time they see it in the classroom is not the first time they see it. The second thing is just this, is that everybody is on technology. The first response when there's a problem in the class, we need to teach our children how to write that initial email and to copy the right people. And then so that we can follow. So if we teach them the strategies for for developing agency and self-advocacy, what we begin to see is this person is going to disrespect them. They realize that they're dealing with little giants as opposed to dealing with little people. And what happens is that child can speak for themselves, they can articulate for themselves. And that's why I think it is. I think equity is something that we do for our children when it should be something that we do with them. And so when we do it with them, we are equipping them to handle situations when we're not in the space. And then parents will hold their child accountable. They will hold teachers accountable. They will hold systems accountable. So then we have classes where we teach our parents. Like Dr. Noise said, we need to literally say, Mom, Dad, this is what you need to do. These are the steps. But that means that we have to be invested in our people and not invested in these systems. We have to invest in our people and say, it may cost me something, Dr. Noise, Dr. Montgomery, Dr. Early, but guess what? It's worth the cost, because that's why I got in this game in the first place.
It's almost, I cannot let this conversation go without doing a selfless plug for our newest curriculum, which is called Roots for Success, which is exactly what you just talked about, Dr. Early, in terms of really teaching kids about their identity, who they are, why they should be proud of who they are, how they can be agents for themselves, be an advocate for themselves, and understand that, you know, everything they think they're feeling is actually true. You know, if it feels like you're being called out, you probably are. Well, you're not imagining these things. So how do you handle it, and how can we give you some strategies to really talk about those things and deal with those? And that's what our new curriculum does. And I'm sorry for that plug, but it just was like right there.
No, I'll take it. I do want to say, I'll definitely take that because I think that resources are important, period. And I think that, you know, as a parent who's involved with my child's education and how he maneuvers through the world, you know, it is a great assumption that all parents are equipped with the same knowledge that I have. And so the resources, I think, are necessary, because I think there are many parents who just don't even know they were traumatized in school themselves. Mm-hmm. So they think this is the norm and there is no recourse for it. So, you know, in advocating for your student and teaching your child how to advocate for themselves, I think there is a greater scope of education that needs to happen, because I think many of these parents came out of the same systems and just are like, hey, deal with it because I did, and that's how it works there. It's never going to change. Now, speaking of never going to change, we only have a few minutes left. That's what I like about this Lunch and Learn. It's quick. It's right to the point. What do you believe are the chances of successfully implementing real change solutions with LA Unified School District that, you know, maybe the high school classes won't ever see, but the incoming will see the shift? Not that it's too late for the high school, but so what, you know, what do you see like the chances of really successfully enacting some change and eradicating racial bias in classroom? Because I feel like this discussion has been going on since I was in public school.
In the words of James Baldwin, I have to believe that it can change, because if I don't believe it's going to change, I have to quit, and I'm not ready to quit. And so what it means is that we need to, a dear mentor of mine used to say, it's not that we don't have the answers, is that we're not asking the right questions. And I think we need to ask the right questions so that then we can get the right answer. We got a lot of the what's happening in schools and how it's happening, but then why is it happening goes to those core issues. And then what is the direction of change? We got to begin to build that out and say, okay, it's a two-pronged approach. We're changing a system, but we're also equipping our children with the agency to navigate a broken system. So it's twofold. So I believe it can happen. When, maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm not going to give up hope.
I definitely believe it can happen. And I totally agree with Dr. Early. And if we don't, then what are we doing? Spinning our wheels, which we really hate to do. There's two issues, right? One is, policy wise, we have to be able to focus unapologetically on Black children. Everyone's having conversations about reparations right now, right? There's some cities who are implementing policies. The only thing we really need is for this issue to be solved in school. So if we said our reparations is that we no longer have to apologize, make excuses for, unapologetically focusing on Black kids, that funds go directly to supporting this, funds go directly to really supporting teachers and understanding this, then I think we're going to make some headway. So that's policy wise. And then there's this accountability issue that we really need to deal with in schools and in school districts around this work. And that begins with educating every layer of the system, including our board members.
Definitely.
I have to agree with both of my colleagues here, and I think I want to throw something else out there. I have learned that any system that continues to benefit from a dysfunction will keep something dysfunctional, right? The school to prison pipeline benefits from the situation that our kids are in. And so I look at LAUSD, I have hope always. I don't know if I have hope for them. What I have hope for is that we can educate our community enough to make the kind of demands that created the school I'm sitting in right now. They were on the West Side. They decided that their local school wouldn't do what they asked. They figured out who to talk to and built a school that would do what they wanted it to do. I think our parents, we ought to educate our parents to do the same, because it's easy to be unapologetic when everybody you're looking at is who you're talking about.
Right on. So there were comments made about policy. If you're watching now, maybe next week, maybe the week after, stay tuned. We have a show coming up on policy and how your voice plays into policy, because that is very important also. We are at time. Can you believe it? I thank you all for being here. I thank you for just imparting the knowledge that you did in this short 30 minutes. I think there are nuggets of information that all of our parents can take away, myself included. So thank you so much for that. If you are watching and you have not read the entire report and you're interested in it, it is in the chat. If you have additional questions, just drop them in the comments. Someone from Speak Up will reply to you. And then tune in again, I believe, in 2 weeks for the next show. I don't know that it's policy, but just come back and chat with us. Lunch and learn. Bring your salad, bring your whatever you're having. Join us and learn a little bit. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you. Thank you to Speak Up. And I have to give a shout out and a thank you to Valerie Brayma for sharing you with us, Dr. Noise. I appreciate it. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.